Hey, Phil from the future here. If you want to watch a sick round, I recommend round 2. If you want to watch Minsc and Boo dominate people, check out round 5. Enjoy the show. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU here for another Legacy video. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com and we'll take a look at them after round 1. Today we are going to be playing Minsc and Boo Applejacks, courtesy of my good friend Dr. Bill. Now, this Planeswalker is going to have an absolutely profound impact on Legacy. If you haven't played against this already, buckle up because it's really good. When it ETBs, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create Boo, which is a legendary 1/1 hamster token with trample and haste. For this Planeswalker's plus, you can put 3, yes, 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. And for its -2 ability, you can sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minsc and Boo deals X damage to any target, so Planeswalker, creature, player, whatever, where X is that creature's power. Now, if that sacrificed creature just so happens to be a hamster, you also draw X cards. So imagine the world where you play this, you plus it, you attack with a 4/4 haster, the following turn you minus it, kill a threat, and draw 4 cards. Ho ho ho, it's pretty sweet. Now, why Applejacks? Well, legacy deck names are dumb, first of all. Let's get that out of the way. The Jack portion of this refers to Orcish Lumberjack, which is essentially a reusable Black Lotus at the low cost of just sacrificing a forest. And this can accelerate us into turn 2 Minsc and Boo, which is pretty hot and should be very hard to beat for a lot of decks. Now, the other portion of this deck is going to look kind of like Nick Fit. We are going to attempt to sacrifice Veteran Explorer to ramp ourselves towards these sweet cards that are in our deck, and we're going to do so via Greater Gargadon, which is a suspend 10, and we can sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land to remove a time counter from this. Now, neat interaction. If you control a Titania, he says whenever a land you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, create a 5/3 elemental. So you can sack all your lands to Greater Gargadon while you have Titania to go and just make a giant army, and probably also bring in a Greater Gargadon as well. And a huge portion of this deck list is just good cards. We're just playing things like Endurance and Fury as well, which have really high impact in certain matchups, and they will very quickly become hard castable. The base deck list here was one that came from one of Callum Smith's local events in London. I believe Andy F. was the person who came up with this, and I've only made very minimal changes. I added a couple of ignoble hierarchs into the deck list. I was just really happy with this card when I played similar decks in the past. Just ramping towards a turn 2 Endurance or a slightly larger Green Sun or something seems pretty good to me. Plus, Hamster with Exalted is funny, and I love it. As far as the sideboard here goes, things are pretty pointed, with a lot of the sideboard being dedicated towards making us even better versus the blue matchups. This deck list notably is a little light on specific graveyard hate in the sideboard, but that's because we've got a whole playset of Endurance in the main deck, so we're kind of hoping that those two things balance out. If you're not overly familiar with Dead Gone, it's a flexible card that both can serve as an answer to Merit Lodge while also pinging smaller threats. I'm just really looking forward to getting into these games here. And shout out to Marshall Arthurs for getting me these Minsc and Boos so I could actually try out this deck list. Very much appreciated. Anyway, if you're new here and you like what you see today, please consider subscribing, and if you're a regular, please throw me a like before this video begins. That is one of the easiest ways to support my content for free. If you find yourself in the financial situation to support me, please consider becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon subscriber to gain access to my Discord, or doing a donation deck list of your own. Go for the eyes, Boo! Okay, we've got an Orcish Lumberjack. So we go land Orcish Lumberjack, land 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just play Titania on turn 2, and we get a Once Upon a Time to help smooth this out. Absolutely. My opponent's going to 5. I don't have an endurance in my hand right now for if this is Reanimator. I have a Once Upon a Time, which could be an endurance. Oh, it's Volcanic Island. Interesting. Could be Show and Tell rather than Delver. I'm going to assume it's Delver until they prove otherwise. Whoa, I like that. The basics game can probably be a basics game. I am going to play a land so that this doesn't randomly get dazed. Although maybe that's wrong. Right, what are we working with here? I think I just want more mana. Like, assuming that I actually am playing versus Delver. I think if I have stable mana and can actually cast this junk, I'm in pretty good shape. Orcish Lumberjack is a little bit scary because I don't actually really want to sacrifice my land. So I'm actually kind of playing this in hopes that my opponent, like, uses a lightning bolt on it. Oh man, I'm so nervous now. So nervous. I don't think I go for it here. I am officially scared. Alright. I will cast an Ignoble Hierarch. Go ahead and suspend a Greater Gargadon. Oh, wrong one. I want this zone popped out. And I'm going to go ahead and just crash in for 2 damage and play this a little more conservatively. Like, I haven't done anything that baits a removal spell yet in any capacity. And no plays here is so weird. Alright. This is down to 9. Oh, I've got 2 Minsc and Boo. I also have, like, Titania Greater Gargadon. So, like, that's a thing. Grab another forest. I think I go ahead and just hard cast this like so. Like, really awkward if my opponent dazes. They don't really want to sacrifice a land. Yeah. Let's add red, green, green. And attempt to do this. And with a green. Oh, it has resolved. Yes, I will use that ability. Attempt to put 3 +1/+1 counters on Boo. Nice. Going to attempt to suspend a new copy of this. And bash in for 4, which becomes 5. Now, there are worlds where my opponent is still Show and Tell, just the Show and Tell variant that plays Daze. In which case, I'm slightly more scared. Okay. Alright. I may be dead. I may have played too scared of interaction, and now I'm just going to eat an Emrakul. There is the sneak attack. And the activation. Okay, air quotes, it's just Grizzlebrand. There's worlds where this misses. They need both Lotus Petal and Emrakul in 7 cards. Idea Magica's Fin of Magic is being attacked by Grizzlebrand. Okay, that clearly means Minsc and Boo. Is this a permanent? Sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land. No. Alright, so you have killed my Minsc and Boo going to 11. I have not 11 damage showing. Ho 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 ho. That's a draw. I can sacrifice a forest, giving me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total mana. Is enough for Minsc and Boo, followed by Boseiju. Recount 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 plus 2. Yes. Alright. Alright, sacrifice that. Attempt a new copy of Minsc and Boo. Okay, I do not need a new copy of this. I have an existing one. I can attack for 5 and fling this, which is 9. Or, yeah, I can attack for 5, fling that. Or rather, that'd be 10. That's not lethal, so we'll just do this. Do this. Boseiju that sneak attack. Hit my opponent for 8 after the Exalted, leaving them at 3. And I potentially just beat a Show and Tell in creature. Maybe not like Show and Tell Omniscience Emrakul or something like that. Alright, there is a sneak attack. And an activation. Grizzlebrand is fine. Oh no. Emrakul is not fine, unfortunately. So that does kill me. That's most unfortunate. Both of those are going at me. I can sacrifice some stuff to Greater Gargadon, but that doesn't actually save me here. Alright, a little disappointing, but GG. Alright, I could have won that game if I was slightly more aggressive and less scared of Daze. Now I know. I'm not very interested in Fury in this matchup, so like all of those are going to go as my first cuts. I am very interested in all of these copies of Pyroblast. Some number of endurances can go. Like, I'm basically just looking to do either Minsc and Boo or Titania and have that ramp out of control. I don't super care about this card. Like, those can just become, like, Carpet of Flowers. Force of Vigor technically has some text in that, like, it can technically exile an Omniscience, but probably not in a way that's meaningful, so I don't think I'm gonna play that. But it can answer played out sneak attacks, so that probably is enough to give it the nod. My Once Upon a Time become worse if I'm going to board out 8 creatures, so I'd probably go down on some number of those. And I can consider playing Collector Oof as something that stops Lotus Petals, but eh. Do I want some Dead Gons to bounce creatures? Pretty situational as far as timing goes. Doesn't work on Emrakul. Let's just call this good. I don't think I super want to be playing this matchup. I will keep this. I will probably not hold up Pyroblast for the first turn. Like, it's fine too, but I think I just need to get some mana on board. Veteran Explorer is really good. You do Veteran Explorer, then go into immediate Greater Gargadon and start ramping towards bigger stuff while holding up Pyroblast. Ramps my opponent too, though. I don't know that I necessarily want to do that. Maybe I'll just take the land drop. Like, Veteran Explorer does represent more mana, but I don't think it's all about mana here. I'm gonna grab a Taiga and play out an Orcish Lumberjack. I don't know that I immediately start doing its thing right now, but I want to have that option. Like, this probably gets activated one more turn from now, when I can be at, like, 6 mana. Wow, that is a lot. Wooded Foothills, crack, Green Sun for 1, sacrifice a land, Orcish Lumberjack, 3 mana, down to 2 mana, up to 4 mana, Green Sun for 3, which isn't particularly good. I think I'm just going to go ahead and suspend a Greater Gargadon attack for 1 and hold up Pyroblast. I could hold up, like, Pyroblast plus Orcish Lumberjack for days, but I don't really know how good that is. And then hopefully next turn, I just, like, draw a mana source and then Green Sun for Titania and make a hopefully unbeatable board. But definitely nervous about this matchup. I don't think my interaction's all that great here. Preordains are fine. Like, this Pyroblast is very specifically for show and tell, although I would think about countering something like an expressive iteration as well. No shuffle with the Ponder. Alright, there is a Titania. I maybe need to cast a Green Sun here. Like, I am not doing a great job of advancing my board having missed this land drop. Want to sacrifice this immediately for any reason? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think I wait one turn. Because I want to be able to always have Pyroblast available. And by sacking Greater Gargadon, I do have Pyroblast available right now. Which I think is important. Alright, more cantrips. Okay. Pyroblast as interaction can potentially be a little bit awkward. Yeah, you can play your second main phase Lotus Petal. I don't think I need to do this end of turn for any reason. I might attack for 1 with this Veteran Explorer. Alright, this is all fine. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just tapping this mana and attempt to cast a Titania, which I think I'm into. Sacrifice this forest, go to 5, cast Titania. That is a force pitching a show and tell. That makes me scared. That makes me think I'm about to eat a sneak attack. I think I need to counter this spell. That's just the vibe that I get. Alright, is Titania happening? Alright, Titania is happening. I can target a fetch land here. I can go ahead and fetch. Gets me a glorious, glorious 5/3. I will grab a forest. Then I get cute, I think? Yeah, then I think I get cute. So let's sacrifice Veteran Explorer. Yes. I'll grab a forest and a mountain. And now we'll go ahead and cast a new Green Sun for another Veteran Explorer. You see where this is going? You see where this is going? Alright. Sacrifice that. Get 2 more lands. Move another counter. Cast a third Green Sun. Grab yet another Veteran Explorer. Sacrifice Veteran Explorer. Top and off. Now, let's always yield to this, huh? We're going to be attacking with a Greater Gargadon this turn, in case that wasn't abundantly clear already. Always yield to Titania. Okay, that's good enough to get a concession here. Sick. Alright, let's do that again. So, in this matchup, I kind of have this gap between, like, 6 mana for Green Sun and the early stuff. So, like, the early acceleration is good, the Titania is good, the stuff in the middle is a little sketch. How do I feel about Gone when I'm on the draw? I wouldn't say that I feel good, but I think some number of those is happening. Let's maybe trim 1 Greater Gargadon. Maybe trim 1 Veteran Explorer? Unsure. So I have my best card in the matchup in the form of Red Elemental Blast, but the rest of my hand basically does nothing. I think I will mulligan this. This hand also does nothing, unfortunately, just in a very different way. Okay. This is the best hand of these so far. I 100% throw back one of those, and then it's harder from there. I'm never throwing back Pyroblast. I'm probably never throwing back Carpet. I'm never throwing back probably these 4 cards, so it's one of these 2. Gone is very specifically good. I'm going to keep the mana ramp here in hopes that I can actually do something kind of cool with this hand. But it may be correct to just keep the situational card since I've gone to 5 and my hand is relatively weak. But, like, this allows me to play Carpet on turn 1 into Ignoble Hierarch on turn 1, and then very easily leave up Pyroblast for the rest of the game. That's a very bad draw. Alright, Carpet. This is a great daze if my opponent has it. Like, no. Yes, I will use his ability. Make green. Play out Ignoble Hierarch. And we're hoping to avoid the worst timeline, which is just Soul Land Show and Tell. But I think I have to get on board like this. Alright, fantastic. Okay. I have whiffed on a live draw here. I'm just going to go ahead and play Pyroblast. Bash in for 1. Got a piece of interaction up for Show and Tell, and I have very good top decks. Ooh. Well, that can go back to my hand. This unfortunately means that my Pyroblast will be dazable if I just redeploy Carpet of Flowers. What I think I want to do... Yeah, I think I want to do that. I think it just, like, so strongly telegraphs what I have if I don't play this out. My opponent's not under very much pressure, so I think they just can kind of slow their roll regardless. Yes. Green. New Carpet. I'll go ahead, bash in for my 1. This only blocks creatures with flying. Huzzah. It's a very unexciting 1 point of damage. But we'll take it. Play out a Dryad Arbor so I can start attacking for 2 instead. Alright, we are not seeing the end of turn Brazen Borrower. I don't think my opponent is going to be super interested in trying to kill me with a Brazen Borrower. Alright, are we fetching in the upkeep? No, you like what you have, which is scary. Alright, there's the Show and Tell. I will attempt to counter. That is a Force of Will, pitching a Daze. I'll put in a Forest. You've got a Grizzlebrand. That's a little bit better than my thing. Alright. We're just gonna thin a land and then draw 7. Oh, shit. Okay. Yeah, that's totally reasonable. I have 9 mana. Minsc and Boo. Well, I'll make some green. I'll make some red. I'll cast a Planeswalker that I assume gets countered, because my opponent can draw 14 here. And they do. Puts them to 1. And my opponent will have 13 cards in hand after their draw step, and they can draw up to 20 if they need to. I imagine this is curtains for me. This feels like a very tough matchup for me. Alright, there is the sneak attack. Are we Emrakulin? Oh, we're not. Okay, I'm not dead yet, somehow. I mean, like, my opponent still has a billion cards, so I'm absolutely still scared. But I'm not 100% dead, just like 99.99% dead. Let's make an absolute ton of green mana. And slam a Titania. Hardcast Force of Will. Yeah. So I think I'm not on realistic outs. Like, I can technically draw a Dead Gun and bounce a Grizzlebrand, but I think I just die this turn. Yeah, that'll do. GG's. This is not what I'm looking to play against. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is a deck building website, and I've got my Zonksha EDH deck list pulled up here. In addition to just keeping track of, say, what cards you do and don't own, there's a lot more functionality here. You can see the chances of playing various cards on curve. You can take a look at your mana curve, the number of symbols in your deck, or you could even look at sample opening hands and even playtest with the deck itself. Okay, I've got 2 lands in my opening hand. This isn't really a keep in my eyes. Whereas this most definitely is. I'm going to throw back 1 Veteran Explorer. And we'll see if we find like a greater Gargadon off the Once Upon a Time. Orcish Lumberjack and lands here. I think I'm just interested in the lands. Alright, so let's play Mountain into Orcish Lumberjack. And this does attempt a turn 2 Titania, if I feel like that's a good idea. I may or may not, but it's probably may. Ooh, we're playing against Death Shadow, which means that Daze is on the table. Oh, fuck, that Thoughtseize is so good. No. Yeah, there it goes. Oh. Well, that's cool. I can go ahead and fetch a green source here. Cast a Veteran Explorer. I can then suspend a Greater Gargadon. I don't need to sack with the Veteran Explorer immediately. I'll just bash in for some damage. The damage does kind of help out my opponent, but at any moment I can take a lot of counters off of Gargadon. 3, 4, 5, 6 counters that I can just rip off of Gargadon. Veteran Explorer is also like a very respectable blocker against this deck. Alright, they're down to 12. Death Shadow is a thing. And I could use to top deck something other than a land, was going to be the tail end of that thought, just in case anyone was curious. And we're chilling. Not crazy to attack with Orcish Lumberjack, but it's bad against, like, Snuff Out, Street Wraith, Dismember. I don't know. Maybe that attack's okay. I think I'm supposed to block with the Veteran Explorer this turn. Despite the fact that Death Shadow is currently a 1/1, because, like, Urza Saga is a thing that exists. Not Urza Saga, Dress Down is a thing that exists. Okay. There's the fetch to make it so that this doesn't just die. And I will go ahead and sack a Veteran Explorer. And I think I just grab double Forest here. I do have the Orcish Lumberjack in play. Okay, cool. No follow-up play from my opponent. So I could go all in. And if my opponent doesn't have a counterspell, I just win. That worth it? I don't think that's worth it. I'm gonna go ahead and just attack with Orcish Lumberjack. Put my opponent to 8. I can fetch a Dryad Arbor out of my deck, block with Dryad Arbor, feed that to Greater Gargadon. This feels like I have a decent number of very annoying top decks that I would be very happy to draw and not put myself in an all-in situation. Alright, so let's fetch. Find Dryad Arbor. Go to blocks. Block with Dryad Arbor. Sacrifice it for the greater good. Take 0. Opponent still just has 5 cards in hand. Okay, that's very good. So this just represents a Titania, which I would be extremely happy to cast. There is a Daze. I will sacrifice a Forest, and we will continue to play this game. Yes, I will pay. There is your 5. Now I can play Greater Gargadon around Daze and attempt to kill my opponent after I've forced them to use 2 counterspells this turn. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cast Greater Gargadon. Okay. Pitching Stubborn Denial. Disgusting. So, I think most ways that would have played out. If my opponent had that many counterspells, it just wasn't happening, folks. Alright, I eat 8 here. And I think I don't win from this position. I definitely don't win from this position. Alright, GG. But yeah, like, waiting for this doesn't solve anything. Second Titania is cool, but I do not regret my line. Okay. Do I want Pyroblasts to fight against my opponent's counterspells? My opponent's counterspells are incredibly mana efficient, so I kind of feel like the answer is no. I don't super want Orcish Lumberjack here. I want more consistent mana since my opponent has so many counterspells. I think I'm going to go Lumberjacks out for Carpet of Flowers as a starting point. And Durance and Fury are both kind of whatever. Pyroblast is kind of whatever. Ooze is kind of whatever. I think I'm going to take Ooze as a curve filler. And I could go for Dead Gone, or I could go for Pyroblast. I think they're both medium. Alright, how is my opening hand? Green Sun for Dryad Arbor, then play Veteran Explorer and kind of get stuck on mana. I don't think I'm into this. I think I'd rather just mulligan and keep a 6 that has better mana. I mean, this qualifies. I throw back the second Greater Gargadon here. This really has to be Taiga, unfortunately. I think I want to play Veteran Explorer now before they can daze it, because they can't daze Greater Gargadon. And I'm honestly really going to be hoping to draw a land as well. I guess if my opponent thought seized the Greater Gargadon, that would have been a problem as well. Alright, well, this is something. Alright. Suspend Greater Gargadon. Alright, you pop out. Do my little love tap. Drop my opponent to 19. I am willing to go ahead and just do this. Yes. Grab one of each, I suppose. One only gets 1 there. And absolutely willing to play a Green Sun for 1. Would love this to resolve so that I can just, like, chain another Veteran Explorer. I think I am just so incredibly likely to win the game if this resolves. Unfortunately, it did not. And now I'm just looking for more mana. Luckily, I've got, like, I don't know, 20-ish lands left. No, like 18-ish lands left. There's one of them. Absolutely willing to just jam spells here. Like, with Titania coming, like, I am good with attempting these things. Forcing the counterspells out of my opponent's hand. Resolve one of these, and then, like, they're very good with Greater Gargadon. Like, my opponent almost certainly has counterspells if they're not playing cards out on their turn. Okay, there is the Hardcast Daze. We've succeeded in taking 2 counterspells out of hand. We're looking to, like, hopefully use another counterspell or 2 on the first Titania and actually resolve the second. I do kind of need to draw some lands here, though. Opponent's thinking about something. Gurmag Angler? Gurmag Angler's fine. Alright. Land. Thank you. Attempt Titania. Okay, that is the third free counterspell of the game. It's okay. Like, I can do this again next turn. But if my opponent counters my fourth relevant play of the game in a row, like, it kind of is what it is, you know? Alright, I'm down to 10. I'm probably dead next turn. 2 dazes have been used. 2 dazes have been used. I think I go for the play that probably just wins me the game here. It is dazable. Okay. Grab a Wooded Foothills. And start doing the thing. Alright. Grab like a Dryad Arbor here. I'm about to sacrifice it all, so it doesn't super matter. Alright, 1. Well, actually, I guess it does matter because of days. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Cast the Greater Gargadon. I'll bash in for 9 haste damage, putting my opponent to 1. Hydroblast is acceptable. And minus something absolutely wild like an Echoing Truth. I think we're just good here. Okay, that does get the concession. That feels nice. Pyroblast becomes a little worse on the draw. It's still worth considering. Same is true with Dead Gone. The issue with Dead Gone is, like, it probably doesn't kill a creature. It can bounce like a Gurmag Angler or a Murktide if my opponent were playing that, but like bouncing a Death Shadow is just like delaying a turn. Which sometimes is important, but eh. I think since I'm just kind of tapping out and jamming like these 4 and 5 mana cards, like Fury included in that, I don't think I'm going to have mana held up for Pyroblast a lot of the time. Kind of a medium looking opening hand. It leads on Vista, Ignoble, Hierarch, and then just like plays an Endurance. Dryad Arbor is super awkward, as is the Greater Gargadon. It's okay. Not good, it's just okay. Do I just keep this on the draw because, like, Green Sun, Veteran Explorer, any land improves this hand? Probably. But I'm, like, not stoked about it. Also, I haven't been, like, super hyping it up, but, like, this deck is absolutely doing its thing right now. Thoughtseize is very good. I think Thoughtseize just takes my Ignoble Hierarch. I don't know, there's worlds where it takes Minsc and Boo, because this is just, like, a blocker every turn forever. Oh, it took the Gargadon. Unexpected from my point of view. Alright. So, we're playing our Goblin Shaman this turn. And see if our opponent has anything to say about it. I probably just play Endurance into Daze next turn. We'll see. Like, the sooner I play Endurance and clear the graveyard, the less likely my opponent is to actually cast a Gurmag Angler or Murktide Regent that could be a problem. Okay. Well, Wasteland. And that was a shuffle. Ooh. This is effectively free. I think I'll go ahead and play that. Now I'll go ahead and move to my second main phase. I only get 1 mana here since my opponent played Wasteland. I think that's fine. So let's just attempt to cast this nice, easy main phase Endurance. And I don't really care if it eats a counterspell. Daze is fine. The Daze is more annoying in that it takes mana away from me for Carpet of Flowers than anything else. Alright, opponent's at 13. And that's just their turn. Another Endurance. Alright. Am I casting Minsc and Boo or Endurance? I think I'm casting the Minsc and Boo. Dryad Arbor is really awkward in my hand. Yeah, I think I cast it. I didn't need to fetch there. Also. Well, or sorry, I did. Because I want to attack with this. Okay. It's getting a Brainstorm at least. Alright. Force pitching Murktide Regent. Now, I could Hitchcast an Endurance here to clear my opponent's graveyard. and make it so that they can't, like, Murktide me. This gives up an insane amount of value in the worlds where my opponent does not have Gurmag Angler or blue land plus Murktide Regent. So I think I just take my attack, but let the record show that I thought about it. Alright, take your 2. Sorry, take your 1. Like, I think they pitched Murktide Regent because they don't have the second blue land, but I don't know for sure. Okay. Destroy each artifact and creature with mana value equal to the number of fuse counters on it. Sure. That's fine. Yeah. I'm just going to play a Fury this... Or sorry, I'm just going to play an Endurance this turn. Yes. Make green. We'll just cast this Endurance at this speed. I will clear your graveyard. Bash in with an Ignoble Hierarch here. For that little love tap. Or each artifact and creature with mana value equal to the number of fuse counters on it. So they could use that to blow up my Dryad Arbor here. I don't know that that's what that creature is doing. Or sorry, that's what that card is doing. Like, it's just better to blow up an Ignoble Hierarch, I think. This has been a weird game. Alright, it did tick up. And we're chilling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible mana. I did not board in Elector Oof. We get Scavenging Ooze. Kind of like Scavenging Ooze. Make my green here. Maybe I don't like Scavenging Ooze because Powder Keg picks up. I'm kind of feeling the gap here, and I don't necessarily want another 3-drop because of this Powder Keg. I don't know, maybe I just go big in that case. Like, it's the same amount of damage. Yeah, it's still the same amount of damage. This one's dazable, though. Okay. I have picked up Titania. It is super dope. A Snuff Out. That's tough. Alright, so I get another land. My opponent should... Yeah. So my opponent should destroy my creature here so they take 1 less damage. If I don't get the Exalted. Next turn I hopefully just, like, kill my opponent. I probably can't Fury one of their creatures out of the way, but if I resolve a Fury, I probably kill them on the backswing the following turn. That is a Wasteland on Dryad Arbor. That occurs. Okay, and just a concession there. Okay, that was a pretty cool game, although admittedly a bit of a weird match. Okay. Once upon a time can find me a land, or a mana source, or a mana accelerant, and I'm on the draw. I think I keep this hand. Like, on the surface it's sketch, but basically everything improves it. Alright. We are potentially playing against elves, or Reclaimer elves, or 12 post. Okay, Dryad Arbor, you do not improve the hand. Veteran Explorer, though. That improves the hand. I'll take that. If this is a green-white deck, I don't want to play out this right now. I want to suspend Gargadon right now. So let's go ahead and do that. Call it a turn. And then I can go ahead and play Veteran Explorer and immediately sacrifice it next turn in a lot of worlds. Ooh, it is green-white. So, are we just going to hold back and do some activations? We are. Love to get this Minsc and Boo online. I say as I draw another Gargadon. Okay. So, going up to 3 mana this turn doesn't really do me much good, but I can still go ahead and play this out. And I will suspend another Gargadon. Although I kind of suspect that if my opponent goes for a Dark Depths based combo, I'm just dead to it. Alright, it begins. Alright, there is a stage. So, life's pretty bad. Why is life bad, you might ask? Because if I sacrifice this Veteran Explorer, and my opponent has 2 basic lands in their deck, they, like, get to fetch them out. They use that to Elvish Reclaimer, they turn one of those into Dark Depths, and they can just immediately activate with 1 extra mana, so they only need actually 1 basic in their deck to just kill me. So, I can't take that line to play Minsc and Boo. I instead have to hold up casting Endurance to block. And then I don't really know how I long-term beat a Merit Lodge. So I think I'm just dead. I am going to continue to play this game of Magic in case I do some absolutely crazy Titania nonsense. But outside of Titania nonsense that I can kill my opponent in one turn with. Ooh, shit, they didn't go for it. We're still in it. That's not great for me. And then, like, more and more. I didn't have to fetch. Yavamayo's in play. So more and more here, I have to be concerned with what else my opponent can tutor up. So, like, me getting Endurance isn't necessarily a guaranteed win. Or not, like, even a guaranteed turn of blocking at that. Because, like, this thing exists. Alright. I will play a Minsc and Boo. Gonna resolve and make me my friend. We'll use this ability. Go ahead and put some counters on here. And then I pretty much have to chill. I wonder if I can deal 20 to my opponent in a single turn. Probably not. Alright, so this whole thing is happening. Opponent copies Dark Depths. They keep the copy with no ice counters, which causes it to be sacrificed, so they get a Merit Lodge. And I presume that they then will sacrifice their basic forest on their turn to get Sajiri Step, give this pro green, and crash in through my Endurance. But I've been wrong before. Unfortunately, I am not wrong this time. Alright, there's the pro green. I will concede. I don't have another flyer here. This sort of matchup is why we have these dead gons. We're pretty soft to Merit Lodge. I'll probably board in Scavenging Ooze as just a mid-range card here. The good news is I can relatively safely accelerate out this stuff in this matchup with Orcish Lumberjack. What don't I want? The whole, like, Veteran Explorer, Greater Gargadon thing is a little scarier here. I don't know that I'm super into it. I still like Greater Gargadon for, like, Titania combo. Maybe I go down to Veteran Explorer as a Green Sun target. That gets me most of this, and then I can, like, trim an Endurance or a Fury or something. Endurance has reach and blocks. Fury is early removal. They do different things. Let's trim an Endurance. Yes. Yes. I want to get Taiga on turn 1 so that I can Orcish Lumberjack 2 turns in a row. But I guess I can do that anyway because of Titania, so it's whatever. Yeah, let's just not get Wastelanded on turn 1 here. Because that would be real bad. Then turn 2's sick. Turn 2 is real good. Depending on how deep I want to go. I can play Greater Gargadon, Veteran Explorer, sack, put 2 lands into play, then play Titania. But that gives my opponent mana. I'm not sure that I want to do that. So I think I'm probably waiting a turn in a lot of cases. So, yeah. Okay, good choice. And a Reclaimer, sure. I don't know that I want to give my opponent more mana. Mana's probably not their bottleneck, but I'm still not sure that I want to do it. Minsc and Boo. Yeah, I think Titania is just better. Alright, 1, 2. Cut down a tree. 4, 5. Titania. Return a fetch land. Thatch. Always yield to that. At this point, I don't really care that that's wastelandable. We'll go Taiga into Suspend Greater Gargadon, and at instant speed, I can make 2 more elementals and just be attacking for lethal damage next turn, or at least theoretical lethal. Theoretical lethal damage is pretty cool. Although that, like, does require blowing up my lands, which is a real cost. Seems fine, though. We'll see what opponent's working with over there. The thing is, like, my cards in hand are just so frickin' good. Do I want to go for it? I don't think I have to go for it. Like, I think it's fine, but if my opponent has some random Glacial Chasm-esque card, oh, that's good. It's just super bad for me. So basically, if I leave Orcish Lumberjack untapped, I can just do that whole gone thing at instant speed and bounce a Merit Lodge if that needs to happen. And play Veteran Explorer, sack it, go up some more lands. I don't really know that I need to ramp my opponent. Might just attack them for 10 and see what they do. And then make decisions accordingly post-combat. Or I can do this, though. And this is pretty cute. Alright. Sacrifice this. Yes. Grab 2 lands. Repeat the process. Oh, whoops. Forgot about that part. I boarded out some Veteran Explorers. Okay, my line doesn't work anymore. In which case, this was a bad line. Well, that's going to look super fucking weird to my opponent. We'll just deal with that. Alright, they're going to take the 10. They're just, like, very dead next turn. Giving them some more mana to work with, but I don't really think that's a problem. Alright, do your search. Thespian Stage is fine. Crop rotation is fine. That's fine. Not expecting fling nonsense. It can happen. That's fine. Okay, so now I've got this gone. I'm gonna just cast this on my turn. I'd like 7 mana on my turn. I don't know that that's gonna happen because I also just want to make a bunch of elementals. So you're an elemental. You're an elemental. I think I float a mana. You're an elemental. Okay, yeah, opponent's just conceding. Fantastic. The last one was harder. My opponent theoretically can have 3 blockers, but that still leaves lethal damage. I think I, like, go to my own turn with this available in this last land around, but I sacrificed the Dryad Arbor. So I ran into a line where I wanted to multiple Veteran Explorer and couldn't, but I don't know that that means that I'm supposed to board in more. I think on the draw, I want the other Endurance to fight against the size of my opponent's creatures. I don't really know what I'm supposed to board out. Like, do I go down on Fury? Like, Knight of the Reliquary sometimes is outside of it, but, like, I really like extra early removal spells for Elvish Reclaimer because I'm so bad at fighting their combo. I'm gonna go down to Once Upon a Time. Like, 3 versus 4 Once Upon a Time is pretty marginal difference. I have 5 mana on turn 2. I don't have a Titania. I will have 6 looks at a Titania. Probably okay. Like, I have Green Sun if I need to wait a turn. I will keep this hand. Actually, I guess it's 7 looks at a Titania, right? Because I'm on the draw, and I can also look for it on turn 2. Yeah, that's fine. Like, that's probably better odds than what I get off of mulliganing. Opponent's very good at finding Elvish Reclaimer. Fury changes this hand a lot. Alright, let's cast this Once Upon a Time. It was a very bad Once Upon a Time. So I always grab Wooded Foothills. I think I always need to pitch cast and kill Elvish Reclaimer here. Which is unfortunate, because that was my best piece of mana acceleration here. But we are going to be playing a much fairer game than I would like here. But hopefully, like, my opponent's hand was built around this card, and I just kind of neuter their hand. From here, I believe I am supposed to play Ignoble Hierarch on 1 as my mana accelerant, because I can save Green Sun to become another creature later. And hopefully I've now kind of dictated the flow of this game. Okay, I like seeing that. I love seeing just to pass the turn here. That's very good for me. Green Sun. This could be a Green Sun for an Ooze. Is there anything else I want to do? Green Sun for Ooze into Eat and play Endurance. Alright. I'm into it. Green Sun for 2. Grab Ooze. There's worlds where I like Green Sun for Ignoble Hierarch and attack for 2, and just work towards this being Titania as quickly as possible. But that's still at least 1 more turn cycle off after my next turn, so I don't think I like it. I think I'd rather just be better versus, like, Elvish Reclaimers and Knight of the Reliquaries in the future. Okay, that's fine. Minsc and Boo would be a sick top deck. Nope. Couldn't call the shot. Okay, this is going to be fetch basic mountain, play endurance at my opponent's end of turn. Means I can go ahead and start doing little up taps. I'm very much not good against my opponent just having Dark Depths naturally in hand, though. There's nothing to be done if that happens, though. Fuck. Alright. I can thin my deck of a land and play a chump blocker. Opponent may have one or two of those in their deck, it varies. Send away those cards. Oh, yeah. So this is 3 mana to kill target Merit Lodge, which means I have 2 mana to work with. I can just choose to get another Ignoble Hierarch. But I think I just wait a turn cycle and then use the green sun to get a Titania a good portion of the time next turn. I don't think I need the 1 extra damage right now. Alright. Bash in with Endurance. Gonna be so good. Alright, my opponent takes the damage. And we'll see if they go for the combo. They do. So same song and dance as before. They make a 20/20 creature. And I will Gone it. 3 mana bounce it. Bouncing kills tokens. Life's pretty bad for them. A Dryad Arbor is not what they are looking for. Do I want to fetch out my own Dryad Arbor in any worlds? No, I want to leave more lands in my deck right now. Okay, cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a green sun for 5. I don't need to show my opponent that now in most worlds, right? Yeah, I'll do that post-combat. Alright, bash in for 4. Opponent goes to 10. Fetch. I guess a wastelandable target is actively good for me. And cast the big spell. X is 5. Grab Titania. Grab a Foothills. Pass the turn with the ability to create an elemental. And this probably is the GG point. Is there anything that beats me? I guess there's some crop rotation targets that could do some weird things here. I will fetch with the Wooded Foothills. Both of these get blocked. I only have 3 damage. Probably fine to grab Dryad Arbor here. See what we draw. An Endurance. That's pretty gross. I think I'm happy enough sending in every single relevant body. These 2 larger creatures just have to be blocked. Well, okay, I guess that is 9 damage. Or 8 damage this way. Okay, do I want to cast Endurance to Shrink Knight to a 2/2? Keep my Titania alive. In a world where my opponent has a crop rotation, I don't actually do what I want here by casting Endurance now. Because they just, like, float their mana. Trigger resolves. They cast this again, it's a 3/3 again. But in the worlds where that's not true, this is pretty gross. Target my opponent there. Ah. Yeah, they did have the crop rotation. This doesn't trample or anything. Shouldn't they have blocked here? Didn't they block on Endurance? Yeah, they blocked Endurance rather than the Elemental. Maybe they thought it had trample. Or they have Maze of Ith. They're Maze of Ithing this. Oh, they do have Maze of Ith. Okay. Alright, Maze of Ith on Titania instead. So they can keep their Knight of the Reliquary alive. That brings them to 4. And keeps their Knight of the Reliquary alive so that they can tutor with it. So my opponent currently has 1 blocker plus Maze of Ith, taking these 2 things out of combat, meaning that they still take 7 damage. Assuming that I'm willing to attack with both copies of Endurance. Not expecting multiple copies of Maze of Ith. In the world where my opponent has crop rotation, they can take 3 bodies out of combat. I don't think that matters. 1, 2, 3 out of combat. That is still 4 damage. That is still lethal. Unless my opponent has multiple Maze of Ith. Multiple Maze of Ith is possible. Alright. I am fine casting this now. It informs my decisions and also informs my opponent's decisions. Misty Rainforest. Understood. Not fantastic. I think I'm just going in. Yeah. Like, show me that you can stay alive. Sure. It is Glacial Chasm. A Maze of Ith and Endurance. That's fine. Probably actively good for me. My opponent's Knight Tutor package is deeper than normal. Probably just like messed up, right? Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. Combat damage can still happen, so they could have blocked and killed an Endurance, right? I believe that is correct. The opponent gets one turn of this as a shield easily. After that, they can do some copying with Thespian Stage. Okay. Game is going to get a little annoying. So the reason not to fetch is my life total going above 21 via a random Swords to Plowshares. But I really like thinning my deck of lands right now. Got some major hits like Minsc and Boo that I very much would like to find. Veteran Explorer, not fantastic. Final damage that would be dealt to you. I'll do this. I hope they don't have multiple copies of this card. I am in trouble if they do. Actually, I might not be, right? Because they're out of, like, forests and plains after this. They need to get, like, a Yavimaya here first. Okay. This feels suboptimal to me. Like, I don't know what their one card in hand is, but unless their thing is a forest or plains, I think they're supposed to get a Yavimaya first, because otherwise they can't tutor up something afterwards. And then they can get rid of the Glacial Chasm so their stuff can attack. I don't know, maybe they don't have it. Like Yavimaya. Classic. That's very frustrating. That's a very sad way to lose. Alright, GG. Like, that was a game that was very much in my favor. And we just ended up barely on the wrong side of it. Like, I'm happy with how I played that game. And I think opponent did some missteps, but it worked out for them. Okay, my hand has Once Upon a Time, which can filter into some threat, but, like, currently I'm looking for not only a threat, but also a greater Gargadon, so I think this hand is just missing too much, and it also has the dead Dryad Arbor in it. I'd rather just mulligan here. No? I think no. Let's go to 5. Yes. Very easily, yes. This just plays Orcish Lumberjack into Titania on turn 2. I have to put 2 cards back. It's probably Fury and 1 Mountain, I think. And I don't think I want to get Wastelanded immediately. So let's go Mountain, Orcish Lumberjack. Soft to a lot of things here, but, like, it's a mulligan to 5. What do you want from me? Alright, opponent hates fun. They're pitching an Uro. We're playing against a control deck. We've mulliganed to 5, and we're not going to have any relevant plays. Game 1 here is probably over. But I have some very powerful cards that I can top deck, like Minsc and Boo, that will probably be very strong in this matchup. Alright, what are we doing? Feels like Ponder. Okay, a minute ago I joked that my opponent hates fun. I will immediately rescind that comment. Opponent loves fun and is a good person, innately. It begins. Kind of a neat forest. So I could fetch Dryad Arbor here, block this, and then go up to 3 lands in play instead of 2. But I don't think I need to do that right now. Orcish Lumberjack. Yes. I think I play the Taiga and do that way. There's opponent Bug. Like, are we going to see Abrupt Decays? Like, is this Allurin? We are going to see Abrupt Decay. Like, this could just be a one of Veteran Explorer in Allurin. Or this could be a dedicated Veteran Explorer deck. I'm kind of into Dryad Arbor here, because Dryad Arbor puts me up to 5 mana on my turn, which lets me play Titania. But I don't know what my opponent's doing. And given that I don't know entirely what my opponent is doing yet, maybe I don't let them just, like, sacrifice the Veteran Explorer. Alright. I will play my own Veteran Explorer. Well, how do we feel about that, huh? Like, does my opponent attack? If they attack, do I block? I think if they attack, I block. But it's definitely weird. Force of Will is kind of scary. Because it becomes hard castable, like, very easily. Oh, Thoughtseize me. Alright. Rude. You are already dead. I respect the flex, but don't know that that's the technically correct by the book play, you know? Alright, so I lose my Elemental Lady. Wait. Abandon Hope. Sure. Alright, so are your last two cards Alurin and a Sararak? Alright, Alurin, Recruiter of the Guard. Revealing Arctic Merfolk, which they kick, and the kicking that returns Recruiter of the Guard. Finding Cavern Harpy. Cavern Harpy then bounces Arctic Merfolk, and this process is going to repeat. And I think I'm gonna, like, sleeve some Magic the Gathering cards while my opponent kills me, because they bad-mannered me multiple times. So this combo does kill me here. This is Cavern Harpy bouncing Parasitic Strix repeatedly. Oh no, my opponent said they love my videos. Alright, I won't make you click through it then. GG's, I'll sleeve my cards later. Alright, what do I want for this deck? I have a bunch of things that are of medium power level. So, in post-sideboard games, a lot of times the Alurin deck goes towards being a more mid-rangey deck. So I'm kind of interested in Scavenging Ooze. I've become a little bit less interested in my Veteran Explorers, because they funnel my opponent towards a combo. That said, I don't know that I can really replace it with, like, Carpet of Flowers. It's just, like, awkward. Force of Vigor's okay, but my opponent's smart. They just, like, combo off on my turn to play around pitch casting that. And then, like, I have a bunch of interaction, like Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, Dead Gone, that are, like, fine versus the combo, but just fine. And a lot of times with proper play and sequencing and priority passes, like, a single removal spell doesn't do as much as you think it might. So given all of that, how do I want to board? Like, my answer might be, like, just try to be the better mid-range deck. My opponent's got Force of Wills, making my Orcish Lumberjack slightly more awkward. I want this Ooze. Do Ooze out for a Veteran Explorer and call that good. I'm really not confident here. I would like to play first. Once Upon a Time can find me a second land, and then I can do Veteran Explorer, Greater Gargadon into Minsc and Boo. I'm going to keep this, but again, like, this whole Veteran Explorer thing is a touch awkward. Collector Oof? Did I grab Collector Oof instead of Scavenging Ooze? Sure did. Sure did. Okay. I guess this can just get Taiga. Right? I'll go ahead and fetch. Grab Taiga. I think I play the Veteran Explorer first, rather than suspend the Greater Gargadon. And here's to hoping that one of these two Minsc and Boos can do something cool. I don't need to sacrifice my Veteran Explorer immediately. That would have been a Scavenging Ooze. Ah. Alright. So we'll go ahead and suspend a Gargadon. Attack for 1. Absolutely wish that this was the card that I actually intended on sideboarding in. Happens to us all, though. Alright, Cabal Therapy resolves. I think my opponent is pretty unlikely to hit on this front half. Yep. That probably would have been my name. Alright, so I've made it safely to my turn. So I'm going to play Minsc and Boo, so I don't actually want to attack with Veteran Explorer here. Yes. Grab 2 forests. I'll grab a mountain off of Prismatic Vista so that I have red and green. Fetch. Grab that nice looking mountain. Let's make it hamster time. Brainstorm's fine. Brainstorm again. Okay. It has resolved. Yes, I will use this ability. Plus on Boo. Crash in for 4. The worry here, though, is that, like, my opponent just has another green source, plays Alurin, and then goes off. Alright, your Cabal Therapy resolves. Named Collector Oof. There is an Alurin. There is a Recruiter. And my Fury cannot be played at instant speed. So this means that my opponent presumably has the whole combo again, and I am just dead. This was the whole worry with the line that I took, right? Alright, I am not going to make my opponent click through it here. I will go ahead and concede. GG's. We are now 1-3. We've kind of been just on the wrong side of a lot of these matches. Alright, my hand has turn 1 Orcish Lumberjack into turn 2 Minsc and Boo. I am super on board with this hand. Island. Cantrip. Not cantrip. First catcher. Alright, opponent is playing Merfolk. I will respond with a Once Upon a Time. Those are some cards. This is actually pretty tough. Like, Fury is super scary for my opponent. So is Titania, but I already have a very good turn 2 play. I think I'm just going to pick up a... I don't know, like, I don't have something to pitch to the Fury. I think I'm just going to grab Titania. In good news, I recently just played this deck, and it felt absolutely terrible. So, I think the only cards that I care about in my opponent's deck are basically their 4 copies of Force of Will. Actually, no, that's not true. I also care about... I care about Daze this turn. I don't care about Daze next turn. Alright. Mountain. Lumberjack. Alright, dodge the Daze this turn. It is very good for me. Oh no, I think I'm going to do this really awkward thing where I think I'm releasing the Merfolk video after I'm releasing this video. I swear, the Merfolk deck is good. It wasn't a horrible league. Alright, I will absolutely not block that. I don't care about this Chalice of the Void that just happened. So, do I care about Daze? If my opponent is randomly playing Force of Negation in their build, like, there's differences between these lines. Minsc and Boo isn't Dazeable, but is Force of Dazeable. Titania is Dazeable, but not Force of Negationable. Let's cut down a tree. Got 4 mana. Play around Daze. Alright, it is a Force of Will. What was the pitch? Pitch was Silvergill Adept, that's fine. So I can just probably repeat Minsc and Boo again next turn. Minsc and Boo becomes worse if my opponent puts a creature into play that, like, actively pressures the Planeswalker. Okay, I'm just getting hacked for 1 again. Unlicensed Hearse. That's very good against Titania, actually. They're playing a different build than what I played. I do not believe that they were supposed to tap that. Because now I can play Titania. Minsc and Boo better. I don't know, just getting 10 power into play and following up with Minsc and Boo next turn is really gross. Again, Daze being the only card that I care about there. I think while I have the opportunity to make this card in my hand good, I should probably take it. Oh, this super punishes my opponent's line. I'm very happy about. Nice. Prismatic Vista. I want to make this now. I guess I'll make this now. I always know that I'm fetching Forest. Alright, good stuff. And I've got, like, Minsc and Boo next turn. I'll potentially also do Fury-based stuff if I need to. Some worlds where a True Name Nemesis becomes awkward, but I think I'll beat through that. That's fine. Right, everything's fantastic. This is a nice pitch option. So let's go land, load a mana, sacrifice that forest, get another 5/3, play a Minsc and Boo. Fantastic. Yes, I will use that ability. Plus, put counters on here. If there's like a Merfolk Trickster involved in... Okay, yeah, never mind. Alright, overwhelming board presence here. So my opponent has Chalices, but is somewhat likely to board them out against me. I will probably just, like, become a control-ish deck. Maybe even Ooze, too. I don't know that I want, like, Oof or Force of Vigor for Vile. But, like, I can board in, what, 5-8 removal spells? And I already have Furies to start with. I'm not super interested in Endurance. Like, it's a 3/4 body, which, if I can block, is pretty good. My opponent's playing Tide Shaper. They can make me have an island, but they're playing a Chalice build, so they might not have that. Force of Vigor also does stuff versus Unlicensed Hearse, which I guess matters. How am I boarding in this many cards, though? It probably means boarding out Once Upon a Time. I probably board out most of the Orcish Lumberjacks, despite the fact that, like, they're, in theory, pretty good. Maybe even all of them because of Carpet of Flowers. Like, that gets me Carpet to replace those. That gets me all of the blasts, and I still want a couple more cards. I don't really know how to board from here. Like, Endurance ambushing my opponent's creatures is super cool. But just killing my opponent's creatures might be better. Unsure. Also possible, like, I do want some outs to Unlicensed Hearse, but I think my plan is just chump block that thing. Yeah, this is a totally reasonable hand. A little worse if my opponent very specifically plays Chalice of the Void. Again, I'm kind of expecting them to board that out. I might need Force of Vigor for game 3 if they do keep Chalice in. But against, like, the Minsc and Boo Titania deck, I would not be super keen on Chalice personally. The hope is that they just lead on an island of some kind so that I can play Carpet of Flowers into Ignoble Hierarch on turn 1. But they can just lead on Cavern some portion of the time. Nice. Alright, no turn 1 play. I will absolutely attempt the high roll play here. Oh, nice. They have just told me they don't have counter spells. Fantastic. And I will play Ignoble Hierarch. I have an overwhelming mana advantage that might become even larger here. Okay, that's fine. What is requiring them to pay costs like this? Oh, Silvergill Adept. Sure. Alright, they have revealed a Master of the Pearl Trident. So I'm going to play a land. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. I can just attempt Minsc and Boo immediately, which I think I'm into. Because last turn, they basically showed me that they did not have a counterspell. So I think I'm into this. Okay, that is a Force of Negation. Pitching the Master that they showed me previously. That's a-okay. So next turn, a lot of the time, I just Green Sun for Titania. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, assuming they play an island, or I draw a land. I have 6. Oh, is this it? Just an attack? Very good if that's the case. Does mean my opponent's... Oh, wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so this one's Minsc and Boo with Red Elemental Blast backup. That's insane. We do the thing. Oh, it's happening. Yes, I will use this ability. We'll plus put the counters here. I will attack for 4, which is actually 5 damage. And I have Red Elemental Blast up for whatever nonsense my opponent tries. Alright, they're at 15. Dismember? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get that back. Like, Minsc makes a new one of these at my upkeep. I will let my opponent hit Minsc for 2. I'm totally fine with that. I would much rather counter like a True Name Nemesis or something like that that comes down. Alright. Loyalty goes down. There we go. Counter target blue spell. Goodbye, True Name. Alright. And now we're going to see the power of Minsc and Boo. Like, this thing is absolutely going to take over this game here. So I'll say yes, get a new one. I get to put counters on it. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. Which does get me a Titania if I want it. But I don't have a fetch land right now. So that's a little awkward. I think this turn's going to look a little different. Just checking to see that Scavenging Ooze is in my deck. It is. Let's say yes to this. Make green mana. Going to cast a Green Sun. I have to pay green. For X is 2. Do this. Grab the Ooze. Eat a True Name with my floating mana. I think I'm fine playing a Boseiju as a land. Plus Minsc on Boo. Go to combat. Hit my opponent for 5 with Exalted. That drops them to 6. I can't think of a reason not to play a Veteran Explorer. And we'll call it a turn. I don't know how my opponent can come back from this. Like, even a True Name Nemesis doesn't, like, clog up the board from this just hamster that is going to fly at my opponent's face. Okay, and that is the concession for a 2-3 in the league. Overall thoughts on the deck list. Very fun. Thumbs up in the fun category. Minsc and Boo is an incredibly powerful card, so the ability to ramp it out quickly is really not to be underestimated. That said, Orcish Lumberjack is a risky card, and if you play your Orcish Lumberjack into Minsc and Boo, and then that Minsc and Boo like is countered, that is a pretty feel bad situation. And in a couple of the rounds, you saw me kind of like just playing conservatively as not to take too high of a risk against a deck with counter spells. The whole like Orcish Lumberjack into Titania line is super cool, and like Greater Gargadon with Titania is great. Greater Gargadon with Veteran Explorer is pretty good as well. There's some complicated lines in this deck involving like multiple Green Suns and getting Greater Gargadons into play by chaining Veteran Explorers that are pretty cool. This one gets a thumbs up from me, and I think you're randomly going to steal a bunch of games with like Fury versus decks like Elves or Death and Taxes, or Endurance versus Graveyard decks. So like that's pretty cool. Is this a new tier 1 strategy? I don't know. Like, I think Minsc is a little bit better in blue decks, as many of these like very powerful splashy cards from supplemental products often are. But like, this deck gets a thumbs up for fun and like a slight thumbs up in terms of competitive value. Like, it's a little bit janky, but like we played good games of Magic and we're like right on the incorrect like line of a lot of these matchups. I also think this deck in some ways might be better against a more defined metagame than there's just the random league meta, where we're like not the greatest versus like Grizzlebrands and Merit Lodges, but like Minsc and Boo is pretty darn respectable versus fair blue decks. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I did really like the sideboard Carpet of Flowers to mitigate the risk in the blue matchups though, so like that helps a lot. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please click the like button. It helps out a lot. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And if you end up wanting to mess around with this deck list or get one of your own decks on the channel, all that information is available in the video description. See ya!